welcome to my first drive video on Volkswagen's Arteon R shooting brake. Think of this, on paper at least, as a very practical Golf R. Over the past couple of years, I've seen a handful of these, no more than that, driving around on UK roads, and each time I see one, especially any in this beautiful optional lapis blue, I do think to myself, I wonder what they're like. And finally, I contacted Volkswagen UK's press team, and I've had this for the past week. So I'm looking forward to sharing my thoughts and experience with you guys. As with so many cars on sale in 2023, the retail price of this car is quite shocking. A base Arteon R shooting brake is now going to set you back £58,500. And this particular press car, with a load of options, which we'll talk about once we jump inside, well, this one retails at £66,000. In terms of its competitors, to me, it's kind of a standalone product. And yes, many publications and people have compared it to BMW's M340i, which is right in terms of pricing because a base M340i Touring is £60,000, so next to nothing in it between them. But a 3 Series Touring is a lot smaller and less practical than one of these. And I think that's what is so key about this particular car, is its size, is its space inside, in the front, in the rear, and its massive boot. In terms of styling, well, I think it looks really, really good. It's striking, it's unique, it stands out from the crowd. And I think that's part of what makes the Arteon R such an interesting package. It couldn't be more different to something like Volkswagen's Passat, which is a brilliant car, but it's very mundane and ordinary in terms of styling and the way it looks. It kind of fits in with the crowd, whereas this, well, it really doesn't. It's received so many compliments in the 5 or 6 days that I've had it so far. Even people like Patrick, my good friend, cameraman, production wizard from Drive Talk podcasts, even he complimented it, and he doesn't like anything that's less than 30 years old. When you walk up to it the first time and you open the front or the rear doors, you see that the doors are actually pillarless, which is pretty cool. And when you jump in the back, let's bear in mind that the driver's seat is set in my driving position. I'm 6'4". You very quickly realise that there's a lot of space in here. There's plenty of headroom, plenty of shoulder room, plenty of leg room. It's a really comfortable and nice place to sit. And this one that has the pan roof, there's plenty of light coming in here. I think if this was your family car, well, whether you're sitting in the front or in the back, it's just really comfortable and spacious. It's a really nice place to sit. As with so many cars, if you do move to the centre row though, yes, you very quickly lose headroom. That is always going to be the short straw seat. And then when we get around to the boot, it's absolutely massive. 590 litres to be precise. That's 90 litres bigger than BMW's M340i Touring. It's about 30 litres bigger than a 5 Series Touring and Audi's massive and mighty RS6 Avant. And it doesn't stop there either. Underneath the boot floor, there's plenty of secure storage space. And when you fold those rear seats flat, you're left with 1,630 litres. So you're beginning to see that this Arteon R shooting brake is exceptionally practical. Underneath the bonnet, we have a familiar Volkswagen Group 2-litre 4-cylinder turbocharged engine. Produces 320 horsepower and 420 newton meters of torque. All of that is fed through a 7-speed DSG gearbox, and that gets to the tarmac via Volkswagen's 4Motion 4-wheel drive system. This Arteon R also has a fancy torque vectoring rear differential. Guessing it's very similar to the one that's in the Mark 8 Golf R. It does weigh about 1,800 kilos, which is a lot, but as we've already talked about, it's a massive car. It's almost 5 meters long, so you'd kind of expect that. And Volkswagen claim it will do the 0 to 62 sprint in just 4.9 seconds and go onto a limited top speed of 155 miles an hour. This particular press car is on the optional 20-inch wheels that are clad with 245 section tyres. It's a square setup all round, so the same on each corner. I'm not sure what its claimed MPG figures are, but in the time that I've had it, I've averaged about 28, and on longer runs I've seen 31, 32, even 33 at around 70 miles an hour on the motorway, so not bad at all. Jumping into the driver's seat, well, actually don't jump into the driver's seat if you are over 6 foot tall, because, well, one of the first issues I've found with this car in the time that I've had it is this rather low roofline. It's part of the aesthetics, and the outside makes the car look fantastic, and obviously we've already talked about those lovely pillarless doors, but as you get in, you've got to be very careful about this, because the driver's seat and the passenger seat, for that matter, they don't sit particularly low. As you can see, if I'm sitting up in my seat here, well, my hair is just about, my lack of hair is just about touching the headlining. The actual wheel itself is nice, but it has these haptic buttons on them. I'm not sure how you would describe them. I think they're described as haptic buttons. They're the same buttons, and I think it's the same wheel that's lifted straight out of the current Mark 8 Golf R. Feels nice, but you do tend to foul some of these buttons. That's not great. The paddles are quite nice. I think they're plastic, but they feel quite good. And obviously they're connected to that 7-speed DSG gearbox. In terms of the actual infotainment, well, we know the Volkswagen Group infotainment system isn't the best, but this particular setup's not too bad, because we actually have the climate control, etc., on a separated section, and even things like the heated seats are on separate buttons down here. They're not part of a touchscreen menu system, which to me is a big plus. This has Android Auto, Apple CarPlay. You have a few different options on your displays, because this is obviously essentially like a virtual cockpit. I forget what Volkswagen call it, but it's reasonably adaptive. But I've found myself just going back to the traditional dials like I do in most modern digital layouts if I can. But otherwise, aside from the slightly odd driving position, and aside from the fact that I think if this was my car, I would really struggle with it because of the lack of sort of headroom, getting in and out, etc. It is a nice place to sit. It doesn't feel like, in this car's case, 70 grand's worth of car. The fit and finish is really nice, but yeah, I would say it's more like a 45 to 50 grand car. But once upon a time, a couple of years ago, when it was released in 2021, that's probably what it did cost back then. But obviously with inflation, well, yeah, it has gone up a fair amount. In terms of options on this car, I've got them on my phone here. So we have that gorgeous lapis blue metallic paint, that's £1,200. We have ProNav, £1,500. We have Matrix LED lights, which are fantastic. I've tried them a couple of times at night and they really are good. This also has an electric tow bar, it's £950. It has the optional 20-inch Estoril alloy wheels that we talked about on the outside, which look gorgeous and do fill these arches properly. I think the 19s would be too small, although you probably lose a little bit of ride quality, and they're only £620. I think that's quite good value. Has a head-up display, although the one in this car, for whatever reason, I can't get to work. That's £600. Climate windscreen, which we definitely don't need in a day like today, but you probably would need for 8 months of the UK year, and that's £390. And a surround view camera, which is really handy on anything that's quite large like this. That's £350. Let's get this car out on the road. First things first, let's test out this car's claimed acceleration figures. Volkswagen say it will do the 0 to 60 sprint in just 4.9 seconds. I'm in R for race mode. I've got all the traction control and stability switched off because we don't need it in weather like this with four-wheel drive traction. My race box mini is ready to go. My left foot is hard down on the brake, right foot on the floor. Here we go. Oh, pretty hard off the line. Straight into second. We need third for 60, and there we go. 4.85 seconds to 60 miles an hour. So you can add a tenth of that to actually, it's around about what Volkswagen claim. One of the most important things for a car like this, as far as I'm concerned, is what it's like when it's not trying to be a Golf R, when it's just trying to be a good practical runaround. Now if we go back down to this R button on the steering wheel, we can cycle through various modes. So we've got comfort, sport, race, we've got an individual one there as well. But let's just knock it back into comfort. I can also use the touch screen, and there's a button down here. I think that's a little bit of overkill. I'm going to leave it in automatic. This particular model, the Arteon R, comes standard with DCC, which is dynamic chassis control. And that's not a two-way or a three-way chassis control. There's about 15 different minute adjustments in there. But when you're in comfort, it's knocked right back. And I have to say, the ride quality in this car is really, really good, especially when you consider that we're on 20-inch super low profile tyres that are also run flats. And when you consider that the Arteon R is dropped about 20 millimeters lower than the regular Arteon. But ride quality is really good, and I think that's very, very important if you're going to be using this as, let's say, a family car, or if you're going to be using it in the UK full stop, because our roads, perfect timing, are horrendous. They really are just terrible. There's no other way of describing them. And I think doesn't matter how good a car is, if the ride quality's not better than average in the UK, then you're really, really stuck. The reason I'm in Aylesbury is my good friend Josh from Swift Performance actually messaged to say that I've had some Michelin tyres delivered to them. Now actually for my M2, which is still in bits with the engine out, so I'm going to go down there and pick up the tyres, because I thought, well, there's probably not a better car or vehicle to go and pick up 4 Michelin tyres. So let's head to Swift, which is about 10 minutes away, chuck the tyres in the car, and then we'll continue with this first drive review. Well, we almost got 4 massive Cup 2 tyres in the boot of this car with the seats up. They're 295 section. They're rear tyres for my M2, which is out of action at the moment. Almost got 4 of them in the boot. We did get 4 in the boot, but it just wouldn't quite close, so I have one just behind the passenger seat here. Hopefully that gives you a good idea of just how big that boot is. Wouldn't dream of doing something like that in my M3, for instance. You would barely get 2 across the boot of that, so it's a very useful and practical space. What we haven't talked about is what this car is like when you ramp things up a little bit. So I've put it into my individual mode, which is great because it gives me loads of settings, dynamic chassis control settings, as we talked about earlier on. I've got infinite ones of those. I've got that towards the softer setting because it gives you a better ride quality. Steering, throttle response, you name it, it's pretty much there like it is in, let's say, my M3 Touring. What I am going to turn off though is this lane assist, because it is dangerous and it is really annoying, just like so many modern cars. Now, when you pick the throttle up for the first time, well, we already know it's pretty quick. It's not lightning fast. I mean, a few years ago, 0 to 60 in 5 seconds flat was very quick, but nowadays, well, it's quick enough I think for your family wagon. There's enough torque in the mid-range. I think the maximum torque of 420 newton meters is available from about 2,100 RPM. So although this does weigh a lot, about 1,800 kilos, probably closer to 2 tons with me and those tyres in it, that available torque is really useful, and it does get this car going in pretty much all gears. It doesn't mind revving this engine. In fact, that's where all of that power is, well above 5,000 RPM. So you have that low down torque and you have that power up top. But you do feel that this car would have really benefited from a 6-cylinder engine, something like the 2.9 V6 that Audi use in the RS4 or various S4s. And I believe the rumour is that this car was destined for that engine, but it never received it due to emissions and the world that we live in that just is making things more and more boring for us petrol heads. I wouldn't say this EA 888 2-litre 4-cylinder turbocharged engine struggles to pull this weight around, but I can imagine when this car is fully loaded, you've got 4 or 5 passengers in here with a boot full of luggage. At that point, it's definitely not going to feel quick, but it does have ample torque and ample power. And as we talked about on the outside, it's actually been surprisingly frugal, because this engine, it's never been the most efficient engine on the planet, and it has improved over the years. But I thought with a car of this size and weight that it would struggle, but it doesn't seem to have. It's been really good on longer runs, and I think a lot of that has to do with 7th gear being really high, and the fact that although this car is almost 5 meters long, it's a very aerodynamic looking shape, and in fact you don't hear much wind noise on the motorway or when you're doing speeds over 50-60 miles an hour. You do get a fair amount of tyre roar in here, but you kind of get that in most cars in the UK because, again, our road surfaces tend to be pretty dreadful. When you're on a smoother bit like this, that tyre roar seems to disappear. So I wouldn't say it's bad, and like I said, the actual wind noise and the insulation in here in general is pretty good. I wouldn't say this is the ideal road to talk about driving dynamics and handling on this car, but I have had it for the past 5 or 6 days, and I have thrown it down some of my favourite roads, and it's definitely not bad in terms of handling, but you're very quickly reminded how long this car is. You see, from the driver's seat, it kind of feels like you are in a Golf R and you're in something relatively compact. When you look in the rear view mirror, you very quickly realise that you're not in that, and the second you turn into any bend, whether it's a long sweeper like this one or a much sharper one, you very quickly realise that there's a lot of car behind you, because although the nose reacts quite quickly, you can feel the rear end of the car taking its time to go around the corner. And that's quite nice on faster corners, actually. Longer wheelbase, the car feels a bit more stable, but through tighter, twistier stuff, I wouldn't say it's the most rewarding car in the world. You keep expecting to feel a bit of understeer, and to be fair, well, I haven't felt any of that, but you just don't really know what's going on. The car isn't communicating to you that brilliantly like a Golf R or a GTI Club Sport would. Those cars definitely give you a lot more feel and feedback in comparison to this, and I'm sure a lot of that has to do with the wheelbase. A lot of it has to do with the fact this is a bigger and heavier car. So if you're buying one of these with driving dynamics at the top of your list, you might be disappointed. I wouldn't say it's dull to drive, I wouldn't say it's underwhelming, but it's not the most dynamically brilliant and fast estate car that I've ever driven. I was hoping that it was going to have some form of magic in it, but as far as I can tell, it really doesn't seem to. It supports its weight really well. It puts its traction down really well, it stops very well, and it does handle well, but not amazing. As you can probably tell, I'm really confused and not sure what I think about the Arteon R shooting brake. I think a lot of it has to do with how much Volkswagen are charging you for this car now. 58.5 grand base, this one's well over 65 grand. It's just too much money. If you don't need this excessive cabin space and boot space, an M340i Touring is miles better in every single area as far as I'm concerned. Maybe it's not as aesthetically pleasing as this car on the outside, because I think this looks really good. And no, I'm not being a BMW fanboy, I'm giving you a genuine verdict, and I think a lot of magazines and journalists out there have said similar. And when you think that they're both very similar in terms of price, yeah, I mean, for me, the M340i Touring gets my vote every day of the week. But if you do need more space and more practicality, then, well, this car blows the 3 Series Touring away. It really is much bigger, the back seat, and it really does have a much bigger and more usable boot. Another big contender and problem that the Arteon R has is a model within the Volkswagen group. I'm talking about the Skoda Octavia VRS estate. That car is brilliant, and actually, spec for spec, works out about £20,000 less than this. And yes, it doesn't have the all-wheel drive platform, and yes, it's not quite as practical, it is a little bit smaller. I would say it's a bit more practical than the 3 Series Touring, but you can't argue with the fact that it costs well under £40,000 and it has very similar ingredients. Essentially has the same engine. It is detuned, but the Octavia is so much lighter. It's more than 10% lighter than this car, so once you're on the move at least and you've got off the line, it really doesn't feel any slower than this car. So if you really wanted to get new and you were set on a Volkswagen Group car, my money would go on an Octavia VRS estate, and Volkswagen probably won't like me saying that, but it is true, because I think that is the standout value. There is a caveat to that though. A 12 to 18 month old Arteon R shooting brake will set you back well under £40,000, and that's a tidy car with 10,000 miles at a main dealer. Suddenly this starts to make a lot of sense at that kind of money. You're getting so much car, so much practicality, a decent amount of performance, decent amount of economy, you name it, you get it for less than £40,000. I think that's the only way that I'd be persuaded into buying one of these. If you're looking for a brilliant family car that's really big and would cut around your 2 kids and all of the stuff that comes with them, I really think a 12 to 18 month old Arteon R shooting brake is about the best car you could get for that kind of money. As a new proposition though, I just can't get my head around it. I know that new cars are costing a lot of money, we talk about it all the time on the channel, but yeah, this just doesn't feel like 65 plus grand's worth of car. It's good, but it's really not brilliant in any area, and yeah, I think if I just spent that kind of money, I'd be left feeling a little bit cold and a little bit ripped off. And then when I looked at used values and realised that I was going to lose 15-20 grand in the first year, wow, I mean, that's hard to swallow. This car hasn't set my world on fire in the week that I've had it. It hasn't necessarily done anything wrong apart from its awkward driving position and driving ergonomics. This low roofline has hit me in the head a few times, but I'm sure I'd learn to avoid that if I had it for a longer period of time. But I think new versions at 60 grand plus, well, yeah, to me it just doesn't add up. I know new cars are costing more and more, and we talk about it a lot on the channel, but this one just doesn't add up to me, especially when you look at something like the Octavia VRS, or something like BMW's M340i Touring. I mean, the B58 in that car alone must be worth half of its value, so I can see where the money goes in that car. I can't really see where it goes in this. And then when you factor in the horrendous residuals that they've got and what these cost at 12 to 18 months old, well, I don't know, you'd be a brave man or woman buying one of these new, unless it was on a very good finance deal and you could hand it back in 3 years. If you paid cash for one of these, well, yeah, you're going to be burning a lot of it. Anyway, I hope you've appreciated and enjoyed this very honest review on the Arteon R. There's probably a reason that we don't see too many of them out and about. They are cool. I will continue to have a lot of respect for one when I see it driving past me. And as I say, for less than 40 grand, as a large, practical, reasonably sporty family car, slightly used, wow, it makes a lot of sense. It really does. Thanks for watching as always. Take it easy, and I'll see you at another video very, very soon. Cheers.